I never used to believe in the supernatural. Ghost stories, urban legends, things lurking in the dark, those were just fiction. Stories meant to entertain or scare kids. At least, that's what I told myself for years. But no matter how hard I tried to dismiss it, there was always one memory that refused to fade. One night that remained etched in my mind like a scar. For a long time, I convinced myself it was just a nightmare, a trick of my overtired brain. But deep down, I knew the truth. And the truth was far more terrifying than anything I could have imagined. I was 16 when it happened. My life was as normal as it could be. School, friends, a house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. My family had moved in about 4 years earlier, and as far as I knew, nothing strange had ever happened there. It wasn't an old house with a dark history, and no one had ever mentioned anything unusual about it. That night was like any other. I had spent most of the evening buried in my schoolwork, trying to finish an essay for history class. I was exhausted but determined to get it done, so I stayed up late, my desk lamp casting a warm glow on my notes and textbooks. By the time I finally climbed into bed, I was too tired to think, letting exhaustion take over as soon as my head hit the pillow. Then, at some point in the middle of the night, something woke me up. At first, I thought it was a dream. A light, repetitive tapping on my shoulder. It was soft, almost gentle, but firm enough that I couldn't ignore it. My first groggy thought was that my little sister had come into my room, maybe needing something or having had a bad dream. I blinked, my eyes adjusting to the darkness. The street light outside cast a dim glow through my bedroom window, just enough for me to make out a small figure standing at my bedside. My brain was still heavy with sleep, and I barely registered the details. But in the haze of the moment, I saw what looked like my little sister standing there, her face just barely visible in the dark. I muttered something, probably asking her what she was doing, but she didn't respond. She just stood there. My mind was still sluggish, struggling to piece together what was going on. And then I realized something was off. My sister was younger than me. Yes, but she wasn't that short. The figure beside my bed barely reached the edge of the mattress. And something about the way it stood, its posture, was wrong. I blinked, trying to focus. And that's when I really saw it. My blood turned to ice. It wasn't my sister. The figure was small, but not childlike. Its body was covered in something tattered and brown, like old rags. But it was its face that made my breath catch in my throat, because its skin wasn't normal. It had a strange, unnatural glow, a dim, sickly light that barely illuminated the space around it. The head was the worst part. It wasn't human. The skin was a dull, ashen gray, almost sickly looking, and its features, they weren't there. Where its eyes should have been, there were only two deep, empty holes, black as the space between the stars. And yet, despite having no eyes, I could feel it staring at me. Then it moved. The creature pulled its hand away from my shoulder, and as it did, I saw its mouth stretch wide open, but no sound came out. And yet I knew. It was laughing, a silent, impossible laughter. My entire body went rigid. A cold wave of dread crashed over me as I realized that it wasn't just standing there. It was enjoying my fear. The room felt different, heavier, darker. My skin prickled, my pulse hammering in my ears. I wanted to move, to scream, to do anything, but I was frozen. I was trapped in the nightmare, except I was awake. Then, with slow, deliberate steps, it started moving, not toward the door, Not away, but toward the foot of my bed, toward me, and all I could do was watch. The days following that night were unbearable. Sleep became a battle I could never truly win. Even when exhaustion finally pulled me under, my mind remained restless, alert for the slightest disturbance. Every creak of the house, every shift of shadows from the streetlights outside sent a jolt of fear through my body. I was trapped in a state of constant unease, my thoughts circling back to that thing I saw. No, that thing that touched me. At first, I tried to convince myself that my father was right. Maybe it had been a dream, a sleep-deprived hallucination fueled by stress. But deep down, I knew better. I felt its hand on my shoulder, its fingers pressing into my skin with unnatural precision. The memory of its hollow, black eyes burned into my mind like an unshakable curse. Then, something strange started happening. It began with small things. My room always felt colder than the rest of the house, even when the heater was on. Objects would move, not in dramatic ways, but just enough to make me second-guess myself. My books, my alarm clock, even my phone would be slightly out of place when I woke up. It was subtle, but it was enough. The worst part was the whispering. At first, I thought it was my imagination, just a trick of the wind rattling the windows at night. But as the nights dragged on, the whispering became clearer. It didn't come from the walls or outside my window. It came from right next to my bed. Soft, unintelligible murmurs, like someone was standing just out of reach, speaking in a language I couldn't understand. I stopped sleeping entirely. One night, around 3 a.m., I was lying in bed with my eyes shut tight, refusing to acknowledge the whispers surrounding me. My back was turned toward the rest of the room, my body curled up in a tight, defensive ball. I could hear it breathing. Then I felt it, a slow, deliberate pull on my blanket. My heart stopped. The blanket didn't slip like it would if I had moved. No, it was pulled, firmly, purposefully, like someone was testing my reaction. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Every muscle in my body locked in place. Then the bed creaked. Someone, or something, was getting on the bed with me. The weight of it pressed against the mattress, slow and careful, as if it didn't want to wake me. I could feel it shifting, its presence dangerously close. My entire body screamed for me to run, to scream, to do anything but lie there like a corpse waiting for burial. But I couldn't move. The whispering grew louder. A sharp, raspy exhale brushed against my ear. And then a voice, clear, distinct, spoke directly into my ear. "I see you." I lost control. With a desperate yell, I lunged out of bed, throwing myself toward the light switch. My hands fumbled in the darkness, my fingers slipping against the plastic switch in my panic. The second the light flooded the room, it was gone. I stood there, panting, my body trembling violently. My bed was empty. My blanket was crumpled at the foot of the bed, exactly where something had let go of it. That was the last night I ever slept in my room. I started camping out in the living room, wrapping myself in blankets, keeping every single light in the house on. My parents were irritated, telling me I was being childish. My sister, who I could have sworn I had seen that night, swore up and down that she never left her bed. So if she never came into my room, then who did? And why did it want me awake? After the night I heard that voice, I refused to sleep in my room. I told my parents I had trouble with nightmares, that my mind was playing tricks on me, that maybe it was stress from school. I didn't dare tell them the truth. My dad already thought I was overreacting, and my mom, though sympathetic, insisted it was just a bad dream. So, I stayed on the couch in the living room, surrounded by warm lamplight, convinced that as long as I avoided that room, I'd be safe. I was wrong. The first few nights, nothing happened. I stayed up watching TV until exhaustion took me. And when I woke up, I was relieved to find the house still and empty, the morning sunlight filtering through the blinds. But then, on the fourth night, I woke up to a familiar sound, whispering. At first, I thought it was coming from the TV. I grabbed the remote and muted it, but the whispers continued. My stomach dropped. The sound wasn't coming from the television. It was coming from the hallway. I didn't want to look. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to keep my eyes on the ceiling, to pretend I heard nothing, to will myself to sleep. But I couldn't help it. Slowly, as if in a trance, I turned my head toward the hallway, and I saw it, standing just beyond the reach of the living room light, barely visible in the darkened corridor, was the same small figure from my room, the same eerie glow, the same shadowed holes for eyes. It stood there, staring at me, whispering something I couldn't understand. I tried to move. I needed to move, but I couldn't. My body felt leaden, pinned down by an invisible force. My breath came in short, ragged gasps as I watched the thing slowly raise its arm and point directly at me. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it stepped backward. Not in a normal way, no. It moved unnaturally, as if gliding rather than walking, disappearing inch by inch into the darkness of the hallway. The last thing I saw before it vanished was its gaping, empty eye sockets. The whispers stopped, and suddenly, I could move again. I threw the blankets off and ran to my parents' room, pounding on their door until my father yanked it open, furious. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he snapped, rubbing sleep from his eyes. I tried to explain. I told them everything. The voice, the whispers, the thing in the hallway. My mom looked concerned. My dad less so. He sighed, shaking his head. "You need to get some sleep," he muttered. "You're imagining things." He shut the door. That night, I stayed awake in the living room, every single light on, my hands curled into fists. And that was the moment I understood the awful truth. This thing, it wasn't just in my room. It was in my house. And it wasn't going anywhere. I stopped sleeping. At least I tried. Every night, I sat in the living room with the lights on, my body tensed, waiting for the thing to return. But for the next few nights, nothing happened. The house was silent. My paranoia felt almost embarrassing, like maybe my father was right. Maybe I was just exhausted, imagining things in the dark. Then one night, I heard it again. A laugh. Not a human laugh. Not even close. It started as a breathy exhale, like a chuckle forced through gritted teeth. But then it stretched, becoming something deeper, raspier. The sound of it slithered through the hallway, low and guttural, almost like a wet whisper. I froze. It was coming from my bedroom. I sat up on the couch, my pulse hammering in my ears. The laugh continued, growing louder, more erratic. I wanted to run. Every muscle in my body told me to run, but I didn't. Instead, I reached for the remote with a shaking hand and hit the power button. The TV shut off. The room went black. For a second, there was silence. And then, tap, tap, something was moving toward me. I barely had time to register what was happening before the glow returned. That eerie, skin-crawling glow. It was standing right there, in the doorway. Its hollow, black eyes bore into mine, and then it charged. The thing darted toward me in a jerking, unnatural sprint. Its tiny limbs flailed wildly, the fabric of its tattered clothes flapping with every impossible step. It was so fast, faster than I could react. I tried to scramble away, but my body wouldn't move. My muscles locked in terror, my breath caught in my throat. It reached the couch in an instant, and then, darkness. I must have blacked out. When I woke up, it was morning, and I was still on the couch. My heart was hammering in my chest. My hands were clammy. The TV was still on, playing nothing but white static. Had I dreamt it? No. I knew better now. That thing was real. It was toying with me. I didn't sleep after that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it. Those hollow, black sockets, that grotesque, shriveled skin, the way it laughed at me. I couldn't stay in that house any longer. I spent the next day desperately searching for answers, anything that could explain what I had seen. I scoured old property records, searched for deaths or disappearances in the area. Nothing. The house had no history, no violent past. It was as if the thing had just appeared. And yet, I could feel it watching me. That night, I made a decision. I would stay awake until sunrise, then pack my bags and leave. I didn't care where I went. I just needed to get out. Midnight came. Then 1 a.m., 2 a.m. Silence. For the first time in weeks, the house felt empty. Maybe it was gone. Maybe. Tap, tap, tap. My breath caught in my throat. It was inside my room. The sound was faint, but unmistakable. Tiny, uneven footsteps. They dragged across the wooden floor, stopping just inches from my bed. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Then a whisper. "I know you're awake." Cold air washed over me. The voice wasn't deep. It wasn't high. It was hollow, empty. I clenched my fists beneath the blanket, forcing myself not to scream. I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to see its eyes. I squeezed my eyes shut, hoping, praying, that if I just pretended to be asleep, it would leave. But then, the mattress sank. It was crawling onto the bed. My pulse skyrocketed. I could feel it looming over me, its presence like a dark cloud pressing against my chest. Then, something brushed against my face. A cold, skeletal hand. That was it. I lost it. I screamed, thrashed, flung myself off the bed so fast that my shoulder slammed into the nightstand. The lamp toppled over, bathing the room in harsh light. And it was gone. Just gone. I scrambled to my feet, gasping for air. My father burst into the room, his face twisted in confusion and exhaustion. What the hell is going on? I wanted to tell him. I wanted to scream at him, to beg him to believe me, to tell him it was here, again. It was standing right there. It touched me. But I didn't. What was the point? He'd just laugh. Just tell me it was a nightmare. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. But that was the last night I spent in that room. The next day, I packed a bag and moved into the basement. My parents didn't understand why, and I never bothered explaining. But whatever that thing was, it had shown me something. It wanted me to see it. And worse, it wanted me to know it was watching. I never saw it again after that night. Not really. But sometimes, late at night, I'd see a shadow move in the hallway. I'd hear a soft shuffle. a whisper just outside my door. I told myself it was my imagination. I forced myself to believe that, because if I didn't, then I'd have to accept that it was still there, still watching, still waiting. If you enjoyed this chilling story, don't forget to subscribe to Beyond Fear and hit the bell icon so you won't miss any of our upcoming videos. Here, you'll find more real stories filled with mystery, psychological horror, and the supernatural every week. Before you go, make sure to check out the 2 videos that just popped up in the end screen. I promise, they'll leave you with goosebumps. See you next time, if you dare.